Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Today we're going to touch on the topic of whether or not your sonar pinging is scaring away the bass. This is something that's been brought up in a lot of different conversations, and I've had several people reach out to me recently. Not really sure why recently, but in the past week or so, I've had three different comments regarding my opinion on whether or not sonar is scaring the fish. They're pushing them away from the boat. And I think my response to this is a little bit different than what you hear a lot of people talking about. I think the general consensus is that fish are getting used to the different pinging sounds that are being produced either by 2D sonar or your forward facing sonar, whatever it is, that the fish are getting accustomed to that and people are seeing the fish move away. And man, I've got 2 different things that I kinda revert back to. The first thing is gonna be what the technology companies say with respect to how the, sonars work, like, with respect to forward-facing sonar, I know when I was at the Berkeley Symposium back in January or February, they had a Garmin rep there that talked about how their live scope worked and how there was no actual beams that were being sent out that the fish could actually feel. So the logic of the fish hearing or feeling that sonar was something that they didn't think could be, actually detectable by the fish. Now, you kind of got to take that with a grain of salt because you're also hearing that from an electronics company, right? So from that standpoint, it would be in their benefit to say that the fish can't feel it. But I do tend to think that the idea of how the sonars work, that the fish wouldn't necessarily pick up on the actual beam being sent out, the actual echo returns and all that. Now, I will say that your units, your transducers, do make a clicking sound. Now, from a standpoint of the fish being able to pick up on that, yeah, I do think they should be able to pick up on that. So I think that there is some logic to say that the fish can hear or feel or pick up the idea that we have a sonar unit around. So there is some logic to that. But then I revert back to my personal experience. And, the first time I ever heard somebody say that they thought a bass was being attracted to the transducer was many years ago, fishing a event on Lake Hartwell, an FLW tour event. It may have been my second tour event ever, so back in 2011. But Brent Ayler was catching a lot of spotted bass, did fantastic in that tournament. I'm pretty sure he had easily a top 10 in the event. And he caught a lot of the fish where he was going down the center of these drains and he was using his 2D. So this is back in the day of 2D sonar where fish were literally coming up off the bottom to look at his trolling motor. And he would drop down to the fish, end up catching that fish. I remember watching that being like there's no way, that makes no sense at all that a fish would actually come up to the boat to look at the boat. Well, one thing that forward-facing sonar has taught me is that not only does it happens a lot where bass will actually come up and check out the boat. They're literally coming up to it, swimming up, like going out of their way, swimming up to check out the boat. Now, whether that's them coming because it's a shade spot being created by the boat, whether they're coming up to check out the trolling motor, to check out what the sound is, to check out, the propeller spinning in the waters, creating a flash, and they think that that's some form of bait fish ball. I don't really know. But what it does tell me and what it does confirm is that bass are definitely curious creatures, meaning they feel like they're the kind of the big bad wolf in the lake, right? So they're not that worried about another creature coming after them. They've got very few things in the wild that they have to worry about, especially on some lakes that don't have bigger game fish species. And you see the same thing up here in the North Country where you have muskie and pike. specifically muskie, very, very curious fish. They will just come by to check out what's going on. You can catch them in the prop wash of your boat because they're coming to check out, what's going on behind the boat. Like they're just very, very interested in their surroundings. But a big portion of that is they have no concerns that they're in trouble because they're the king of the jungle per se. And bass are very much the same way. So, in my opinion, more times than not, bass are not afraid of the sonar. They're not afraid, or, they're not necessarily swimming away because they hear the clicking. What it could be is that they're attributing that clicking sound to a potential negative outcome. So they're swimming away from that. But I don't feel like if you were to drive over with 2D and hit that bass with your 2D sonar or put your forward facing sonar unit on the bass, that they actually feel that or pick up on that and therefore swim away. I think they could potentially be taking all of these outside sources, putting them together in their little peanut sized brain, saying, I've had negative outcomes with this before, and therefore I'm getting out of here. But in my personal opinion, at this point, based on watching fish with forward-facing sonar, no, I don't think they're scared of the boat. I don't think the boats are necessarily pushing them away. I think there are times where if you're in an area that's got a lot of pressure, you may be pushing the fish in certain directions because they just don't want to be near the boat. But I'm pretty mixed on this. I think if a fish is aggressive and actively feeding, they don't give it. They don't care about the boat. They really could care less. So it's one of those things where you got to take into account how much pressure is on the lake, if the fish are actively feeding or not. But in general, I don't think they're that concerned about it. I don't think most of them relate certain sounds or feels to what is going on in their surroundings. There's really got to be a ton of pressure on these fish, especially when you talk about the fact that a lot of time, if you're using forward-facing sonar and you're in a major creek, yeah, there might be some pressure where boats are going around, but there's a lot of water that gets untouched, and those fish could potentially go a long, long period of time without having being coming in contact with a boat that's using any of their sonars on their boat. So to me, I personally think as an angler, you don't worry about that type of stuff and you worry about your overall presentation, whether that's your casting accuracy, whether that's the structure that you're fishing, just all you take into account the things that you can manage and that you have control over and not worry about the uncontrollable. And the uncontrollable really is that you're dealing with another living creature, and from that standpoint, they're going to do what they want to do. Whether they hear the sonar, feel the sonar, hear the boat, see the boat, and they react based on that, you can only manage a few of those things. The rest is going to come down to what that fish wants to do. But ultimately, I'm not that worried about using it. That's the technology that we have. The technology is going to create pinging, and if I want to use the technology, whether it's 2D, side scan, you know, forward facing, then that's what we have to deal with it. But I don't personally think it has that big of an effect on the fish. So I don't know if I answer your question or not. I feel like I just rambled a little bit. Um, but there's a lot of different variables to take into account. I don't think it's as simple as a yes or a no. Anyways, I hope this answers the question. Let me know in the comments section. What do you guys think? Is it having a big impact? Do the fish know it's there? Do they not know it's there? I'd love to hear from you guys as well. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, hit the subscribe button, like the video as well, and stay tuned. We'll have a new one coming out tomorrow.